You've probably tried like a dozen productivity apps in the last 5 years. You know, you see a YouTube video, you download the new hotness, you spend a whole weekend color coding all your categories, and then
what, 3 weeks later, it's just a digital graveyard?
Exactly. It just becomes another app full of half-baked ideas, dead URLs, and, you know, overdue grocery lists.
Right. It's the classic 12 to 18-month collapse cycle. People inevitably abandon their setups because they're treating a symptom like disorganization without actually addressing the underlying cognitive friction.
And today's deep dive is all about breaking that cycle. We are unpacking an incredibly detailed masterclass level syllabus today. I mean, we are talking about condensing 3 years of system building trial and error into a single conversation.
A lot of ground to cover.
It is, and the mission here is to give you, the listener, a shortcut. We're looking at how top 1% power users are combining two drastically different software tools into one unified hybrid brain, and those two tools are Workflowy and Notion.
Right, which is a highly specific pairing. And what makes this source material so compelling is that it doesn't just tell you to use these apps. It defines strict, non-negotiable boundaries for how to use them, based on how human memory actually functions.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the immediate question anyone is going to ask is, well, why not just find one app that does it all? It sounds to me like Workflowy is your messy whiteboard, you know, the place where the brainstorming happens, the markers are uncapped, ideas are flying everywhere, and Notion is the heavy-duty, fireproof filing cabinet where the finalized blueprints are stored. Am I looking at that the right way?
That analogy actually hits the nail on the head.
Right.
Respecting that cognitive division of labor is the foundational rule of this entire system.
Right.
The sources refer to Workflowy as the front end of thought. It's a thinking engine. Structurally, it's just an infinite zoomable outline. It's designed for rapid capture, messy ideas in motion, and above all, speed.
Speed is key there.
Exactly. You don't have to pause to consider which folder an idea belongs in or what tags it needs. You just hit enter and type.
Which is exactly how your brain works when you're in a flow state. You aren't categorizing, you're just generating.
Yeah, but Notion plays the exact opposite role. It is the back end of knowledge. This is your structured memory, your operating system.
The filing cabinet.
Filing cabinet, right?
Yeah.
It's built for permanent records, relational databases, rich media, and complex project management. It requires you to define properties, dates, statuses.
So the reason our systems collapsed into those digital graveyards after a year or so is because we constantly try to blur those lines. Like, we try to use a filing cabinet as a whiteboard.
Spot on. Think about the friction of trying to do rapid, messy brainstorming in Notion. You have to create a page, maybe set up a database, define the columns.
And by then, you've forgotten the idea.
Exactly. By the time you formatted the workspace, that fragile spark of the idea is totally gone. And conversely, if you try to store permanent, structured relational data, like a client CRM or a complex project tracker, in an outlining tool like Workflowy, it just eventually gets lost in a massive sea of text.
Because Workflowy doesn't have database columns or relations.
Right. And power users know this. They stopped trying to force one tool to do a job it just wasn't designed for. Once you let Workflowy just be a scratch pad and Notion just be a database, the whole system scales beautifully.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is that the best Workflowy users, they don't even click through folders. They navigate using complex search queries. They might type hashtag task and minus hashtag done to instantly pull up every active to-do item across their entire life, no matter where it's buried in the outline.
I want to get into the actual daily operation of this, because the theory is great, but we really need to trace how an idea actually travels between these two tools. Like, how do we move the sticky notes from the messy whiteboard into the heavy-duty filing cabinet?
Right, the pipeline.
Yeah, the pipeline. And the sources detail this through two incredibly popular frameworks. You've got Getting Things Done, or GTD, for tasks, and Zettelkasten for personal knowledge management. So let's walk through a concrete example. Say I'm listening to a podcast about architecture, and I hear just a brilliant quote. What happens?
Okay, so in the moment, everything goes into a Workflowy inbox bullet first. It acts as your universal net. You open the app, you type the quote, and you close it. That is a fleeting note. It's a raw reaction captured at lightning speed without any formatting.
No friction, just pure capture.
Exactly. Then comes the really vital step, which is the weekly processing ritual. You sit down, you look at that Workflowy inbox, and you make a decision. If it's a task, you ask the classic GTD question, is it actionable?
Right.
If it's a quick email to send, you just do it. But if that task is actually a massive multi-step undertaking, it graduates. You promote it out of Workflowy and into your Notion project's database.
Because now it needs structure. In Notion, I can give that project an official status, like in progress, assign a due date, link it to specific outcomes, and use all those structured database properties that Workflowy lacks.
Exactly. And the flow works very similarly for the knowledge management side, the Zettelkasten flow, that architecture quote you captured. During your review, if you decide that idea is profound enough to keep forever, you move it to your Notion permanent notes database.
Okay, got it.
And here is where the sources emphasize the golden Zettelkasten rule for Notion. The permanent notes title must be a full sentence claim.
I actually love this part of the source material. It forces you to actually think. So instead of just titling a note architecture or attention, which is really just a vague bucket, you have to title it, attention is a finite resource.
Right, it forces synthesis. You aren't just hoarding other people's words, you are crystallizing your own knowledge. Once it's a permanent note in Notion, you can start creating maps of content, or MOCs.
Wait, what are those exactly?
They're essentially index pages, where you manually link these big concepts together to form a web of ideas.
Okay, I have to push back here, though. I get the theory, but in practice, doesn't that just lead to a massive backlog in my Workflowy inbox that I never process? Like, if I have to constantly copy and paste my notes from Workflowy into Notion, it feels like I'm creating more friction. Why not just bite the bullet, deal with the slight annoyance of setting up a Notion page, and do it all in one app from the start?
It's the most common objection to a two-app system, honestly. But it stems from a misunderstanding of what friction actually does to the brain. In this context, the friction of moving the data is a feature, not a bug.
A feature? How is manual data entry a feature?
It goes back to the concept of periodic processing. When you are forced to manually move a fleeting note from your Workflowy inbox into a permanent database of notes, that micro-friction acts as a cognitive filter.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it forces you to pause and ask, does this actually matter? Do I still care about this quote 3 days later? If you set up a system where every random thought automatically lives forever in your main database, you just create a digital junk drawer.
Ah, okay. You're intentionally slowing down the storage phase to ensure quality control. The bridge between the two tools is basically the bouncer at the club, making sure only the good ideas get inside.
That's a great way to put it. It guarantees that your Notion workspace remains a high-trust environment. But the sources do offer a way to manage daily tasks without having to constantly shuttle them back and forth, and that's through Workflowy mirrors.
Let's talk about mirrors, because that blew my mind a little bit when I read it.
Yeah, a mirror in Workflowy is a live syncing bullet. It allows you to pull a specific task, say, call the contractor from deep within a massive project outline, and place a mirrored copy of it into a simple Today view at the very top of your Workflowy. You aren't copying the text, you are mirroring the exact node.
So if I cross it off in my Today view, it crosses off in the master project list simultaneously.
Instantly, yes.
Wow. It lets me create a hyper-focused daily to-do list without destroying my overall project structure.
Exactly. It's the perfect balance of infinite structure and daily focus.
Okay, so this desktop pipeline works beautifully when you're sitting in a quiet office with a mechanical keyboard and a hot cup of coffee. But the real world is chaotic. If this system requires sitting down at a desk to work, it's going to fail the moment you step outside to walk the dog.
Oh, absolutely.
A system is only as good as its weakest link, and usually that's mobile capture.
Mobile capture is where most productivity systems just go to die. The interface is cramped, you're usually distracted, and, the internet connection might be spotty. The absolute goal on mobile is zero app launch friction.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say I'm walking down the street, I've got groceries in one hand, traffic is loud, and I have a brilliant idea for a project.
Right.
What is the literal, physical, fastest way to get it into the system before it evaporates? Because the sources lean heavily into Android optimizations here.
Yeah, they do. On Android, the literal fastest method relies on the Workflowy Quick Add Home Screen widget. You don't even open the full application.
Really?
Nope. You tap the widget on your home screen, and a tiny text box pops up over whatever else you were doing. You type your bullet, hit enter, and it instantly lands in your designated Workflowy inbox. The text box even stays open, allowing you to rapid-fire 5 or 6 distinct ideas in a matter of seconds.
No loading screens, no navigating through folders, no waiting for a database to sync. Just tap, type, and it's gone.
Exactly. The sources also highlight setting up email to Workflowy. Workflowy provides a unique private email address for your inbox. You can use the native Android share sheet to forward web clippings, articles, or even voice-to-text transcripts directly into your outline without ever opening the app.
Okay, but let's say I am actually inside the Workflowy mobile app. The desktop version relies heavily on keyboard shortcuts, but on a phone, tapping around a massive nested outline sounds like a total nightmare.
Which is why it's all about tactile gestures on mobile.
Yeah.
The developers built it to feel instinctual. You swipe right on a bullet to mark it as complete. It offers this incredibly satisfying visual feedback, almost like taking a pen and crossing an item off a physical paper list.
Nice.
And if you double tap a bullet, you instantly zoom in, hiding everything else and isolating just that specific node and its bullet.
And what about searching on mobile?
You just pull down from the very top of the screen to execute a full search. This is where you can use those advanced operators we mentioned earlier. You pull down and type last changed :70 to see every single bullet you've touched in the last week.
Oh, wow.
Or is :share to pull up collaborative lists. And for users who really want desktop power on the go, the Android app fully supports external Bluetooth keyboards, mapping all the native desktop shortcuts perfectly.
I was actually amazed at how deep into the weeds the sources went on Android device tweaks. They suggested changing settings I didn't even know existed. We're talking developer level stuff just to shave off milliseconds friction.
It sounds extreme until you understand the cognitive philosophy behind it. For example, they recommend going into the hidden Android developer options and enabling forced GPU rendering.
Wait, developer options? Really?
Yes. This forces your phone to use its dedicated graphics processor for 2D interfaces. The result is buttery smooth scrolling through outlines that might have, tens of thousands of bullets.
And why does that matter so much? Because if there's even a millisecond of stutter or lag while you're scrolling to find a thought, your brain gets distracted by the lag and you lose your train of thought.
It completely breaks the flow state. They also strongly advise turning off Android's adaptive battery feature specifically for the Workflowy app.
Why is that?
Well, adaptive battery tries to save power by pausing background syncing for apps you aren't actively looking at. But if you open Workflowy on your desktop and the note you took on your phone an hour ago isn't there yet, you lose trust in the system. Eliminating these invisible micro-frictions is what keeps you engaged year after year.
We can't forget Notion on mobile, though. I know Notion's mobile app has a reputation for being a bit heavy. What are the rules of engagement there?
The rules for Notion on mobile are incredibly strict because it is a heavier application. The primary rule, never use columns on your Notion pages if you plan to view them on mobile.
Just don't do it.
Just don't. Keep everything single column stacked. Mobile screens are narrow. If you use columns, you're constantly scrolling horizontally, which is a terrible user experience. Furthermore, keep your mobile database views filtered to under 5,000 rows. If you try to load an unfiltered master database with 10,000 entries on a cellular connection, the app will lag, and you'll just close it in frustration.
So it all comes back to the core philosophy. Workflowy is for rapid swiping, widget-based capture on the go. Notion is for scrolling through clean, stack, filtered views. When you need to reference permanent knowledge, you have to respect the boundary.
Always respect the boundary.
All right, we have the capture pipeline down. We've bulletproofed the mobile experience. Now we reach the final stage of our syllabus, the Year 3 mastery stage. We are talking about automating the bridge between these two tools and utilizing some serious power user secrets.
This is the transition point. It's where you stop being someone who just uses tools and you become someone who orchestrates a self-organizing system.
Let's lay the groundwork with the manual bridge first. The sources heavily emphasize something called Markdown. For someone who isn't a programmer, what is that and how does it help move data?
Markdown is essentially a universal text language that carries its own formatting. When you do your weekly processing, the cleanest way to move a complex outline is to export a Workflowy branch as Markdown text.
Okay.
And when you paste that block of text directly into a Notion page, Notion natively understands the Markdown language. Your bold text stays bold, your italics stay italicized, your bullets remain bolded, and even code blocks survive.
Oh, wow. Just straight in.
Exactly. It perfectly translates the Workflowy outline into Notion blocks without you having to reformat anything. The only minor caveat is that Workflowy mirrors become static text once they cross over, because Notion doesn't have a native mirroring feature for text blocks.
But what if I don't want to move the text at all? What if I'm working on a project in Notion, but I want to be able to see my live, messy, Workflowy brainstorm right there on the screen?
Then you use native embeds. You can generate a secret shared URL for a specific Workflowy node. You take that URL, type /embed in your Notion page, and paste the link. It creates a live, scrollable, interactive window of your Workflowy outline directly inside your Notion project page.
That is incredibly cool for reference. But let's talk about building that self-organizing brain. Because if manual copy-pasting is walking and Markdown export is riding a bike, then hooking up third-party automation is basically building a high-speed rail line between your two tools.
A very fast, very efficient rail line. Achieve this using platforms like Zapier, Make.com, or N8N, which is a great open source alternative for the privacy conscious or the more technically savvy. These platforms allow you to set up triggers and actions between different apps.
Give me a tangible example of how that changes the workflow.
Okay, let's go back to your rapid capture. You're typing away in Workflowy, and you realize you need to schedule a meeting. You create a new bullet and tag it with hashtag task. You can set up a Zapier workflow that constantly watches your Workflowy account. The moment it sees a new bullet with that specific tag, Zapier automatically generates a new row in your Notion tasks database.
No way.
Yeah, it takes the text of your Workflowy bullet and maps it directly to the named property in Notion.
So I don't even have to do the weekly manual processing for those specific administrative tasks.
Yeah.
I just tag it, and the high-speed rail ships the cargo automatically in the background.
You can get incredibly granular with it too. You can map other tags in that Workflowy bullet to specific properties in Notion. A hashtag high tag could automatically set the priority level in Notion. If we connect this to the bigger picture, true mastery isn't about memorizing keyboard shortcuts. It's about making your tools talk to each other. Right? When your system is self-organizing, you spend drastically less time managing your life and far more time actually living it and doing the deep work.
Which brings us to the hidden gems. The sources promise some obscure knowledge that completely changes how you use the system. What's the biggest blind spot people miss?
The most powerful hidden gem in Workflowy is a concept called search scoping.
Wait, search features are usually my worst enemy. Like, if I search a word like taxes in most apps, I get 500 completely unorganized hits stretching back a decade-old receipts, random notes from 2018. It's totally useless. How does search scoping fix that?
Because in Workflowy, the search operators respect your zoom level. Most people assume the search bar always applies to the entire account. But in this system, if you have a massive account with years of data, you can double tap to zoom into one specific node. Let's say it's called 2026 work projects.
Okay, I'm zoomed in.
Right. Once you are zoomed in, then you type the search operator is :incomplete. Workflowy will only search for incomplete tasks within that specific work project's branch.
Oh, wow. So it completely ignores my personal tasks, my grocery lists, and my old reading notes because I'm not zoomed out to the root level.
Exactly. It allows you to create hyper-contextual filters simply by zooming in before you search. It turns an infinite document into a highly targeted result. It really is, and it raises an important question for anyone designing a knowledge system. Are you utilizing the context you already have? By combining the physical act of zooming with a search query, you completely eliminate the need for complex, rigid folder structures. The structure emerges naturally based on exactly where you are looking at that moment.
Okay, we have covered a staggering amount of ground today. Let's distill the core takeaways for you, the listener, so you can actually start building this. First and foremost, respect the cognitive boundary. Workflowy is your thinking brain. It's fast, nested, fluid, and messy. Notion is your memory. It's structured, relational, and permanent. Do not mix them up.
Second, process periodically. Use the friction of moving data between the two apps as a cognitive filter to force yourself to synthesize information. Don't just hoard quotes, turn them into full-sentence claims like, attention is a finite resource.
Third, ruthlessly eliminate mobile friction. Set up that Android quick add widget, learn the swipe gestures so it feels tactile, and go into your settings to tweak things like GPU rendering. If capture isn't instant and lag-free, you simply won't do it.
And finally, when you are ready to scale, use automation like Markdown exports or Zapier to bridge the gap, allowing your rapid thoughts to seamlessly populate your structured databases while you sleep.
Implementing even a fraction of this 3-year blueprint is going to act as a massive shortcut. You're going to become highly organized and well-informed, but without the burnout that usually comes from fighting your own productivity apps.
It really comes down to designing a system that works the way your mind naturally works, rather than forcing your mind to adapt to the limitations of a single piece of software.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Think about the productivity app you use the most right now, the one you open every single day. Is it actually helping you think, or is it just a digital junk drawer where your ideas go to die?
That is the ultimate test of any system.
If Workflowy is your messy whiteboard where your mind is free to play, and Notion is your heavy-duty filing cabinet providing total structural clarity, what happens to your ideas when you stop forcing them into the wrong boxes and finally let them flow naturally? Are you fighting your tools, or are your tools fighting for you?
A very provocative question to end on. It has been an absolute pleasure dissecting this blueprint.
Always a blast. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.